Ary Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 4K podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about the culture with plan sponsors and their 401k plan, and how, basically for plan sponsors that a bad 401k plan, doesn't happen by accident. It's pretty much something that's there, and what plan sponsors can alleviate by not having a poor culture. And I'll probably go into a discussion about my former employers and all that kind of stuff. But of course, first things first, go to that 401ksite.com for information on that national virtual conference scheduled for February 4th and February 5th, 2027. Sign up is free. Sponsorship for these events can be free as well if you sponsor one of our live events that we have scheduled for 2027, which we will figure out at the end of the summer for 2027. Go to that 401ksite.com. Like I said, sign up. It's free. And, of course, Amazon.com for Kindle paperback, the last two books, as well as all the books. For that 401k Plan Provider Handbook, as well as Full Circle, which is celebrating 1 year of publication. So let's get to the topic at hand. I've worked at some sloppy places. I was involved with some sloppy places. I've been unfortunate in my experience to work at places with bad culture. And that even includes that 1 year where I was synagogue vice president. It's I always say I was stuck working to help a synagogue, and I was surrounded by the people that took down membership from 750 families to 250 families. And, culture is such an important facet of why organizations fail. I saw it at that Fakakta law firm, 16 years ago when I left. I said, this place is going to be half the size within, a certain amount of time. And they were, I think right now, 16 years later, less than half. Most, I think they're really down to one location. I think they have a ghost office of 2 lawyers in New York City, or 3 lawyers. Gone is the Albany office. Gone is Melville. It was, leaving as the point when I was there. And, a 401k plan for, employers that have a poor culture, they're not going to be immune to problems. A plan, doesn't fail because the stock market dropped or participants made bad investment choices. It fails because the organization tolerates a culture that allows it to be mismanaged. I work for a not-for-profit, not a risk attorney, just as a regular attorney, and you could see sometimes with some people, there's a mindset. Employees as well as a mindset of failure. It's a culture of failure at times. When I was synagogue vice president, they would do the same fundraiser, every single time. And I came up with the idea, well, I want fundraisers where people who aren't members are going to subsidize the place. So I had 2 comedy shows, including one with Sal the Stockbroker from the Howard Stern Show, and most of the attendees were not our members. So we had 200 people. Unfortunately, I listened to the finance chairman and charged $40 instead of $50, because to this day, 10 years later, I'm still ticked off that I kissed away another extra $2,000 of profit. But whatever it is, a 401k plan is not really a set it and forget it product. It's an ongoing operational system, and like every system, it needs discipline. And if there's a lack of discipline, or of the people running it, it's going to be a hot mess. Culture, shows up in late deferral deposits, missed notices, sloppy eligibility tracking, and committees that only meet when something breaks. You don't fix that with a new provider or a prettier investment lineup. You fix it by changing behavior. The problem here is normalized dysfunction is the real risk. At the end of the day, the most dangerous plans aren't the ones that fail spectacularly over one thing. They're the ones that really fail over time, which is the late deferral deposits, eligibility mistakes, notices that are out late. And the problem is the organization sees these errors and starts accepting them as a routine. And that's where a plan will be in trouble. When dysfunction becomes normal, accountability to fix these things disappears. Everyone assumes everyone else is handling it. The record keeper is going to think the TPA is doing it. The TPA is going to think the record keeper is going to do it. We all think the payroll provider is going to have clean data. The advisor is relying on people, and culture is really defined by what gets tolerated. If errors don't lead to a change in the process, if vendors aren't going to be challenged, if leadership doesn't demand answers, then the organization has already decided that compliance is optional. And when it comes to 401k plans, compliance cannot be optional. Process beats personality every time. Bad culture relies on individuals. Good cultures rely on systems. I'll never forget working for a union plan, and the advisor thought he was a superstar. Um, that's really, nobody's here as a superstar. It's all about processes. A good record keeper doesn't, get extra points for having a nice web design or something like that. If your plan just depends on one person who knows how everything works, you don't have a process, you have a vulnerability. The same thing at that Fakakta law firm, we had one person in charge of the plan, and she kept on mismanaging it left and right. Until one point, they called me with a problem after I left, and when she found out that it was me who was going to come in to fix the mess, she made sure to cancel the meeting. But that's life. Being frank and honest, how disappointed you were that she hired the advisor that you didn't introduce them to, and that it would have helped my business or whatever it is. But people leave, people get overwhelmed, people make mistakes. Resettling culture means building processes that don't rely on memory or heroics. And if you have one person in charge, it always leads to the discussion: what if they get hit by a bus? That sort of challenge. And there needs to be eligibility tracking, payroll integration, contribution timing should be built into workflow. The goal in any plan is consistency. You don't want a plan that works because someone is paying attention this week. You want a plan that works because the system makes it hard to fail. And that's what good processes do. It removes variability and replaces it with good discipline. Ownership is obviously the missing piece. It's always somebody else's problem. Ownership isn't about titles. It's about responsibility. It's not about owning the company. It's about taking accountability and responsibility. Someone needs to be accountable for monitoring deposits. Someone needs to ensure eligibility is tracked correctly. Someone needs to oversee the audit process. And when something goes wrong, there needs to be clarity as to who is fixing this. I worked at the school paper, and before I got there, one of the office managers never bothered to send withholding. And so the IRS is wise to these things, and they hauled in the executive director, who was crying, who was told that she might be financially responsible, and our accountant helped negotiate a settlement, but that nobody was watching the office manager, and that she was putting checks in the drawer and never mailing it to the IRS for withholding. Someone really has to be the overseer of things. There has to be a system of checks and balances. When something goes wrong, there needs to be clarity about who's going to fix this. And it's again the fly ball in the outfield. Someone's got to call it, and if it drops, someone's got to take responsibility. Accountability drives behavior, and behavior drives outcomes. Vendors reflect the culture. It's easy to blame vendors when things go wrong. Sometimes that's fair, and sometimes that's not. If you accept missed deadlines, vague explanations, and inconsistent service, that's what you're going to keep on getting. And that's on you. A strong culture doesn't outsource responsibility. That's really important. It manages it. It means setting clear expectations, monitoring performance, and addressing issues directly. If the TPA misses a testing deadline, there should be a follow-up. If your record keeper's payroll feed is constantly off, that's a problem unsolved. Vendor management is an extension of your internal culture. If you're passive internally, you'll be passive externally. And being passive as a plan sponsor will not work. It will cost you. And, committees, it's always the running joke with me. Um, a lot of times committees are useless unless they meet. So when I worked at the Stony Brook Statesman when I was in college, and I wanted to be part of the Alumni Association, so they created a fundraising committee, and I was on it with two other people, and I said, oh, we should sell Statesman alumni t-shirts. I think that's a great money getter. And they're arguing me about the unrelated business tax, and I'm telling them, as somebody who worked on the unrelated business tax issue with a union, who dibbled and dabbled into selling, investment products and insurance and all that kind of stuff, that, slapping a logo on your t-shirt isn't unrelated business tax, because it's a royalty that's related to the organization's business purpose. They were arguing me for a half hour. We never had another meeting. Too many plan committees are like that, where they operate in name only. They meet quarterly, they review a few reports, and they just move on. And that's not really governance, it's routine. A functioning committee is all about being engaged, informed, and willing to challenge what it sees. A cultural reset means changing how committees operate. Meetings should focus on real issues, operational errors, audit findings, vendor performance, and participant outcomes. Minutes should reflect decisions that were made and action items, not just attendance. It needs to be a blueprint that shows the rational decision-making process set in play by, all the governing documents of the plan, which should include the investment policy statement, the plan document, as well as the bylaws of the committee. Committees have to ask, questions. It's all about accountability. If those questions aren't being asked about, making sure everything is done correctly, the committee isn't doing its job. Data integrity is essential to a plan. Every plan runs on it, and bad data leads to bad outcomes. Is what I always say: garbage in, garbage out. Payroll codes have to align with plan definitions. Census data has to be complete. Feeds between systems have to be consistent. A strong culture is going to treat data as critical infrastructure and invest in getting it right up front. Payroll and HR systems should be aligned. Data should be validated regularly. Discrepancies should be investigated and not ignored. And most operational failures out there can be traced back to data issues. You fix the data and you prevent the problem. Ignore it and you'll be correcting errors forever. Training is a control, not a luxury. Another hallmark of pull culture is the assumption that people understand the plan. The problem is staff changes, roles evolve, and institutional knowledge fades. And without training, mistakes are inevitable. A disciplined organization trains continuously. Committee members understand their fiduciary responsibility. Payroll staff knows how timing affects compliance. HR understands eligibility and notice requirements. Training isn't optional. It's part of the control environment, and without it, you're relying on luck instead of processes. It's important to be proactive rather than reactive. Organizations with poor culture are always reacting. They're reacting to issues, problems, deadlines, this, and that. They're constantly putting out fires and mistaking activity for effectiveness. Like I said, when I was a risk attorney, I had to fix up putting out the fires of my administrators. That was a problem. Patterns need to be identified. Processes have to be adjusted. Controls have to be strengthened. Prevention doesn't, prevention is more important, in my opinion, than crisis management, because prevention management is going to avoid crisis management. It will, being proactive is going to reduce errors and build confidence into the system. Culture doesn't change on its own. It's all about leadership. When a leader doesn't do anything and it's paralyzed, nothing gets done. A true reset starts with leadership acknowledging the problem coming to change. That means setting expectations for accountability and performance. It means investing resources when they are needed and where they're needed. And it means holding people responsible when standards aren't met. Without leadership, culture doesn't change. It just, continues. There's a real cost to poor culture. Correction programs and correcting contributions aren't free. Audits, certainly take time and money. Penalties are a real risk, but the bigger cost is trust. Participants expect their retirement savings to be handled correctly, and when mistakes happen, that trust erodes. Employees notice, and environments where fiduciary responsibility is under scrutiny, that loss of trust can have serious consequences. Ignoring culture isn't neutral, it's a decision to accept those risks. Fixing a plan starts with fixing behavior. That means assessing where things are breaking down and addressing the root causes. It means building processes that create consistency. It means defining ownership and enforcing accountability. It also means being honest about what isn't working. Culture doesn't change with, simple fixes. It changes when organizations are willing to confront uncomfortable truths and act on them. The steps aren't really complicated, but they require commitment by the organization. And without that commitment, nothing will really change. It's you give what you get, and you will get the plan your culture produces. It's a reflection of the organization behind it. If you're careful and disciplined, you're going to have a much better plan than somebody who's just loosey-goosey and treats the coffee perks more important than the 401k perk. If the culture is disciplined in the organization, the plan is going to be organized and disciplined as well. And if it's disorganized and reactive, the plan is going to be reflecting that. I think they always say, like, your dog reflects your personality. Well, your plan is going to reflect the culture of your organization. I've seen what bad culture does. There's a reason I work on my own. I had enough. I had enough of the dysfunction. And, working for a school board that's kind of out of whack at times, I just am thankful that I'm billing for it and I don't work there. Within 3 or 4 years, I think I've gone through 4 or 5 principals. And, bad culture turns manageable issues into ongoing problems. It convinces organizations that dysfunction is normal, which it is not. The good news is that culture can certainly be reset, but it requires effort, clarity, and accountability, because in the end, you won't get the plan you want. You get the plan your culture produces. So, I think it's a really important issue that nobody pays attention to. But anyway, please go to that401ksite.com. Further information on that 401k National Virtual Conference, February 4th and 5th, 2027. It's a Thursday and Friday, I believe. If you can't make it, we'll have the stuff up on YouTube. Always fun to have that event. It's always great. I'll never do another national conference again. Never say never, but I'm never doing that. And of course, go to that 401k. Actually, go to Amazon for Kindle paperback of the last 2 books. That 401k Plan Provider Handbook, as well as Full Circle. The first books are available on Kindle only. Actually, that 401k sequel is actually available on paperback. I'm sorry. And of course, tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Take care. Bye.